Rosling, very welcome to the Swedish pavilion here at Expo.
Thank you very much.
It's very good to have you here, and I would like to start off by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you to China.
Well, I was asked to come here to talk about the major trends of global development. You see, I'm a professor of global health. I did research in the poorest countries in Africa. And then I realized that the concept developing countries is stupid because it embraces 200 years of Swedish development. And to put Somalia and China in the same group and call them developing countries, you are nuts if you do that. So you need to be more knowledgeable about the different levels of countries. So I started to innovate graphic ways and software ways in displaying global development. And we've been quite successful with that. That's why I'm here, to make the Swedes understand how China progressed.
So, talking a little bit about the World Expo first, what kind of meaning do you think a World Expo can have to the international relations today?
And the World Expo has always been in the countries that have been most successful in the last decade. So it's very right that it should be in China this time. And it's a need that people meet. This is actually a very old need, and that's what happened at these places. Unpredicted meetings. In English they call it serendipity. It's a very nice word. Serendipity can happen at places like this. People who wouldn't meet otherwise would meet, and they would change ideas and new things will happen.
And the Swedish theme for the participation here is spirit of innovation. And I would like to ask you, what does innovation mean to you?
It's finding new solutions for human problems. When people meet who are thinking about different problems, then suddenly you innovate. It's very important. You see often behind major breakthroughs that it's people working in two different areas who meet and see that the advancement in one area can suddenly then make another thing possible. I was trying to explain the world, and then suddenly there was a leap forward in how you could do animated graphics, and then we made a new software program. That's one little example about how one development suddenly makes it possible for you to advance in another way.
Could you tell me a little bit more about this, the world map that you invented?
Yes,
When was that?
I started doing this in '96. That is a way of displaying countries as bubbles. And the size of bubble, look at the big China here. Size of bubble is population. Small little Sweden up here, you know, this little bro. So it means that you can show all the countries of the world. The color corresponds to the continent where they are. These brown ones are Europe, the yellow ones is America, red is East Asia, light blue South Asia, and so on. So different continents. And then instead of north and south, we have healthy and sick. And instead of east and west, we have rich and poor. And you see how economy is related to health, but not perfectly. And then you can understand where the countries are. We went on from this and made a software program where the bubbles move. And that is available on gapminder.org on our webpage. We are basically a museum, a funny museum on the internet where you can understand the world and you can see how fast China has been progressing. It's interesting to see that the rise of Asia has not been understood in West Europe. We didn't realize that the economic growth in China was preceded by an enormous increase in human resources. People got healthy, they got educated, they got access to family planning, they got two-child families, then started economic growth. In West Europe it happened the other way around. First we had economic growth, then came the invasions, you know. Primary school was quite early, but broader education was later. And then we got two-child families. So it means that the Asian countries, they have well-educated, healthy people who plan for the future first, and then they get fast economic growth. That's why I think this growth will be sustainable.
Yeah, you also told me earlier that the risk is that you don't get these countries to evolve with the other countries.
No, that is the problem. We have the war-torn countries like Afghanistan, we have several African countries, we have bad governments like in Myanmar, and Cambodia had its war problem. We need all the countries to move with us, otherwise we will get conflicts and instability, where we have the poorest countries being stagnant, not moving. and we have the successful emerging economies catching up.
So how do you think this map will look in 5 years?
Oh, that's a short term. That's a typical Swedish question. The important thing is how it looks in 25 years.
Yes.
It's very typical. When the Swede thinks about the future, it's 5 to 10 years. Because we don't know where we are going. We have a pretty good situation.
But also because the world is evolving so fast now.
Yes, but if you talk to journalists from Asia, from India and China, politicians, academicians, corporate leaders, they think long into the future. They make investments now which pays off in 25 to 50 years, you know. Whereas we try to manage economy shorter and shorter and shorter. They say that the Obama administration is measuring Twitter outcomes about the president per day.
Probably are.
Probably like this. It's so short-sighted. And this, I think, is it's natural that it is like that. Because countries who are already rich and healthy, they move into a not only service economy, but a creative economy. The main Swedish innovation is the ice hotel. You can go to northern Sweden, you can live in an ice hotel, you know. And whereas in China, you're developing solar energy, new batteries, and the electric cars, which Volvo and Ford didn't do.
So what about 20 years then? What's going to happen in 20 years?
I think it's going to look like these big bubbles having moved up here.
And what about these?
I don't know. I'm really worried about Afghanistan, Congo, Zimbabwe. Maybe we will have a new split where some of these, even in Africa, Tanzania, Kenya, Senegal, Ghana, are pretty successful. We may have a new split in the world. So we have collapsed countries with terrorists, pirates, diseases, kidnapping, a lot of illegal drug producing in non-controlled areas. And then question is, how will that be stabilized? I'm quite hopeful for the Chinese investments in Africa. It's good if the African government manage them in the correct way and tax them in the correct way.
So your main concerns for the future is a gap between the developing countries and...
Two things. One, when these emerging economies catch up, will we have a smooth acceptance of trade rules and of management? I think I honor George W. Bush today of G20. That was a great step. Forget the G7. The G20 has to manage the world now. If we can manage this without a war, and if we can get the poorest people to come along, which is 1 billion there. Those are the two challenges. The third challenge is the climate and the environment.
So how are we going to save the world?
By trying. We haven't even started to try. We have a very bad global governance structure. So we rely very much on countries like China and India taking the right decisions. We can save the world. It's fully possible. We can do this if we start trying. But we are not trying. We are short-sighted, defending the positions we have now. We are running lobbyism for oil and bad cars instead of investing in the new. But I don't think we can ever solve the climate situation without investment in technology. You can't regulate it away. Because there's 5 billion people who want electricity in their homes and they want washing machines.
So we need to develop energy alternatives.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's going on. And China is doing fine. Honor the Chinese solar energy inventors. That's true innovations which is taking place here. Because it's young generation of physicists and chemists who have studied hard, who know the whole knowledge of it, who get government money to innovate. And they're so proud. I talked with Bill Gates last week, and he said they are fanatic, he said. They are with fanatism building their no solar energy plants. And I can recognize fanatism because Microsoft was built with fanatism. So it's interesting, like a successful, innovator, perhaps the most successful, get inspired from what they see young Chinese people doing now, being determined to make something completely new.